Hello everyone, welcome to our next episode of Race and Point. My name is Lavette Coney.
And my name is Michelle Chalmers. Welcome everyone. We hope you've enjoyed our 2 episodes so far, and we're excited to have our special guest here today, and would love to introduce her and actually let you share a little bit more about yourself if you want. But this is Rebecca Smoler, and I've known Rebecca, wow, it's probably about 10 years, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, I think so. So Rebecca was a middle school teacher at Wellesley Middle School. She taught 8th grade. So if you're wondering, is that my teacher? Is that Mrs. Smoler? Yes, it is. So we're really excited to have Rebecca here today. And she now has a new position in Sharon that she can share. She also does anti-racist education with ideas. And what else would you like to share about you?
I'm a English language arts educator by trade, and then in the last 5 years started working for initiatives for developing equity and achievement for students. I'm also inspired by World of Wellesley, involved in a Wayland group, Wayland Community for Social Justice, and I have 2 great kids. My husband's also an educator, and
You teach for ideas.
and I teach for ideas. So.
Excellent. Yeah. So we are really excited to have you to Race and Point. How did you feel when I called you and said that Lavette and I were doing this show? What did you think?
Well, when you told me you were doing the show, I was very excited for you. When you asked me if I wanted to come on, I was nervous, but I'm excited also.
Nice. Glad to hear that. So let's dig right in.
All right.
So let's talk about some of the things that you're concerned about being an anti-racist white woman.
Sure. So something I've been reflecting on lately with regards to being an anti-racist white person is, just how vast this work is, and that one of the responsibilities as a white person is to be working with other white people and unpacking, white supremacist systems and what it means to be white and how that's impacted, us, white people. Because, as Debbie Irving talks about in Waking Up White, or Peggy McIntosh in White Privilege Knapsack, and other people who have written about this, the benefit of being white is that you aren't aware of your whiteness until you are. And so there is definitely work to be done around that. And then also more recently too, Robin DiAngelo with White Fragility and how that can impact conversations on race. And so there's so much work around whiteness that white people need to be doing. But that also can be used as a way to kind of like escape into talking about whiteness and not be listening to people of color, to be taking action. You can't, talking about whiteness can be limiting, and there's may potentially not lead to action necessarily. You have to be doing, not as you're learning, and so balancing all those white voices I just listed, with Ijeoma Oluo and How to Be Less Stupid About Race, or Crystal Fleming's How to Be Less Stupid About Race. Ijeoma Oluo is So You Want to Talk About Race. And Ibram X. Kendi, we were just talking about his new book, How to Be Anti-Racist, or Ta-Nehisi Coates. So, and then using that information to take action. So,
Is that how you started out? Like if there is a moment, or when you started to think about your racial identity as a white person, when did that, or how does that evolve? How do you sort of figure that out, that that this is more complicated than I thought? That I think a lot of times white people think, oh, okay, I get it. So I'm white, and I've grown up in a white community, and I've had pretty much white people all around me, my friends, my family, and people that I work with. And so in order to be a white person that's maybe more aware, then I just need to learn about black people. So if I just get some books that are written by people of color, or specifically black people, then that's what I need to do. That's what I'm missing.
I think it's one of those really important, both ands, that you have to be doing both. You have to be reflecting on white supremacy and its role that, in upholding racism and how that impacts people of color, and our individual roles in that, while simultaneously learning about experiences that we're not familiar with, if that, specific groups of people of color or people of color's experience, individuals in general, because we don't want to generalize whole groups. But it has to be both. We have to be learning about, what it means to be white while learning about racism in America, because both of those just are going to go together, I think.
What helped you to do? Oh, sorry.
I was just wondering when you became aware of your whiteness. What happened? What was the event?
I took an ideas class. So I started off teaching ELA, and I thought I was, nice, white. I didn't even think white. Good teacher, cares about my kids, which I do. I did. And but I thought, if I have my diversity poster on my wall and I make sure that I have a few authors of color on my bookshelf, then that's and I, have my expectations. That's all I need to do. And my first year in Wellesley, I was encouraged to take, it was then called EMI, Empowering Multicultural Initiatives class. And the first class is Anti-Racist Teaching Practices. And that was when I was first introduced to, Peggy McIntosh and the idea of white privilege, and learning about a lot of history that I had not previously learned in school. The class was, say 36 hours over 2 weeks in the summer, and it was a very emotional class for me. When you're an adult and you haven't been learning about this your whole life, and then you have it thrust upon you, it's hard, which is why, at the end of the day, as an educator, we have to be having conversations about race out of the gate, because it's the only way we can make real change, but also it is a little easier on everyone. That was kind of the beginning for me. And so started taking more classes, reading more, listening more, questioning what I knew. And, it's messy. I make mistakes and cringe at myself, but that was so that was 2010. That was the beginning for me.
It's interesting because I'm looking at how it came into play for you. So it was more intellectual, more based on workshops and learning and reading, more so than an actual incident that happened that made you turn around, between people, that was more heart-centered opposed to intellectual. So that's.
Well, I think it came from a place of care in that, as an educator, again, we all want to create, an equitable learning space, and we do care about all our students.
That you were talking about other people who were, from your standpoint, yes. And then also, too, people who probably were in your situation as well, who felt, I'm doing the right things, and I have those, authors on the bookshelf, and I do have my poster up. So they think and feel that they're doing the right thing as well, but they still don't have the tools and don't have the information to be actually have an impact.
And I think it's hard, with professional development, and there's only so many hours in the day, and there's, I know in Wellesley Public Schools they can't mandate it. I don't believe for teachers to have professional development. I think that they're trying to have at least the first year teachers, when you first start, within 3 years, you need to take maybe an ideas class. But again, one class certainly had an impact on you, which is wonderful. But this is a journey. This is certainly a journey, and it's not anything that, that stops, and it is messy, for sure. It is. So now I'm trying to remember what I was going to say about.
I want to know how you feel about being a white person doing this work. Could you go a little bit more in detail about that?
Yeah.
You said it's messy. So in what ways, and how do you work around those things?
Well, I think even how working around them, we learn from doing and from reflecting and from hearing others' experiences. So, you take those first 2 classes, or I took those first 2 classes, and I was really gung-ho and wanted to begin doing work in school. But when I think about my role in, either feeling like I needed to lead initiatives, or that, going to people of color to validate what I was doing, which is so not appropriate. And I know that's intention-based, asking for feedback or help, or to, be the leader, that's one thing, but then, questioning the work I'm doing and looking for validation, not appropriate. But I think, getting involved in anti-racism work, especially when you're so new to, all of it, yeah. We make mistakes, and so, and I still do, like I said, but it looks like what it looks like for me is nonstop, and it makes me like a little bit not fun, I think, because once you see the system at play, the white supremacist system, racism as a system, it's really everywhere. And where I am right now is feeling that I need to bring it up when I see it. And so I bring it up at work, I bring it up at home, I bring it up in my community, and for me right now, it's, I wouldn't say all-encompassing, but it's a big part of my life.
How does it change your life, the fact that you talk about it all the time? Do some people just get people who know you, knew the you before you became enlightened? Are they feeling like, oh God, why is she talking about? Do you get that?
Not to my face so much. I do have, friends or colleagues who I know are, always up for conversations, and others who may want to, talk about day-to-day things. And so, but in terms of like sphere of influence, so, I'll bring it up, to, administrators in my district, or or point out have conversations with teachers, within my community, speaking up when I can. And then, Michelle and I have talked, we both, I think, are similar in like talking about race often. And so,
But I guess, what I ask a lot of people, a lot of white people specifically, who are engaged in really sort of having, that self-reflection and that understanding about white supremacy and the system, of certainly in the racist policies that we can see, and sort of unpacking that. Would you go back to what you didn't know you didn't know? Would you ever go back to unlearning everything that you have learned and the opportunity that you've had now that you have this information?
100% no.
Yeah. And I think that's important because I feel.
Why. She needs to tell them.
Oh,
why.
okay. All right, why?
Because some other people may be like, oh no, I wish I had not gone down that rabbit hole.
I've never met anybody.
You haven't.
I've never met a white person
but what about
who has.
those people that you don't get over on that side because they can't see that as being a part of their humanity, where they're like, no, I like having these advantages.
They're
I
just
like
not
having
ready
the superiority
yet.
because of the money involved and the economic side of it. That they don't even want to know. That's your problem, not
Right.
mine.
And certainly, like Dr. Eddie Moore says, there's some pancakes you're never going to flip, right? And so that's what that is. But there are other people that just aren't ready. And I probably could, go back and even think about when things have been, put forth for me when I rejected. And I was like, oh, that's not, you're just whatever, overreacting, or that's not a thing. Because sometimes you're just not ready to hear it. And so we're all in different places, I think, when we have that realization, hopefully. But I think once you do tie it and you understand how much more of a human being it allows you to be, that's the amazing gift. And that's why I continue to talk about these things, because you want people to experience what you're experiencing. And so I'm just curious how you feel about why you wouldn't go back to know what you didn't know.
Well, I think for me, part of the pain of that first EMI course is realizing when you begin to understand, again, as an adult, like all this this like secret society, the secret system that's been kept from you, because that's part of the system, is keeping it from you, that so horribly impacts so many people, and that I guess the humanity. I'd rather any day know and be aware and be able to attempt to change things that I can, or support folks doing the work to again affect change. But I think that is part of the pain of it, is that to not know, and to know that people are being hurt from it, and have been.
By design.
Right.
Yeah.
So doing this work, do you find that you've been pigeonholed? Like most people, when they see it, okay, so, she talks about the diversity stuff, or she talks about racism, like, okay, stay clear of her. So do you find that you get pigeonholed?
Maybe so. I don't know, pigeonholed really. I think, and I appreciate.
I'm that way at my school. People, you think, oh, can't talk to her about anything else other than that. That's all she cares about.
Oh yes, not that you can't talk to me about anything else, but that's my initiative. My
like typecasted. Right?
Yes.
It's like, we know
that's my project.
Those certain actors that only get those certain roles, that's all you're looked at to. But is that on the actor, or is that on the people that's all they can see?
It's
right?
all on the people who, you're right.
Yes, right? So, I mean, that's because you're making people uncomfortable, which is what we need to do.
Which I've been told.
Yeah.
By the administration, I'm making people feel uncomfortable. But the problem is that a lot of people see it as a hobby, or see it as a thing, or see it as it's an interest of yours, not understanding it has to be everybody's business in order to dismantle it.
If we're living out the values that we have. So if our values are for a society that is rooted in justice and peace and love and compassion and connection, then yes, then we should all be engaging in these conversations. But if you are not living out those values, and those are not your values are exclusion, you are for racist policies against LGBTQ people, you're against immigration people, coming into this country, those are racist policies. And so if those are your values, well then that's where you're going to be. And so you don't want to have these conversations because they're not your values. And so that's what I mean, not every pancake you're going to flip, is that, we
I want to know how to flip all the pancakes.
How
about you?
I'm one of those half glass, half full. Like I realize that not everybody is on the same page, and some people.
And if they're not on the same page, then where are we going to ever get there?
But
right?
You don't need everybody, right? The boat flips.
If we flipped all the pancakes that are open to flipping, then it's either like get on board, or
the boat's sailing.
Right, the boat's sailing.
Yeah, that's like with any change. That's with the civil rights movement. I mean, you could go back in the civil rights movement and the majority of white people were like, we don't have a problem. I don't understand why these people are out on the streets.
But then you have these how many steps forward and how many steps back as well, right?
Yes.
I mean, and has anything really fundamentally changed even after our civil rights movement? So this is a reason why you have the few that don't, and then they're on the sidelines. With the bubbling up, like what happened recently in our society, right?
Right.
You had these groups of people who were just still with their heated anger and whatever have you, waiting for the opportunity and chance to so-called rise up, and look what we have right now.
Well, and I think you have something to say about that, too.
I think that goes back to having to talk about these issues, at the youngest age we can.
Right.
Jennifer Harvey has her book on raising white kids, and I saw her speak recently, and she talked about how, for white teens, who are learning about this for the first time as teenagers, it can be really hard to hear, especially at that time of life, which can lead to some of, what's happening in our country right now. Because it hasn't been part of the dialogue all along, and we're not talking about, the strengths of all our ethnicities and like all together, and also the horrible history that has come from the founding of this country. And so some of those feelings, again, when you're learning about it as a teenager or as an adult, can lead to some of those toxic reactions that we're seeing now.
I remember I was working with a preschool locally, and a teacher had shared with me that she was reading a book about I think it might have been either about maybe Ruby Bridges or the Little Rock Nine, and as she was reading the book, she could see the children curious and seeing and questioning, like why is Ruby Bridges being treated this way, and what is happening here. And a little girl, a white girl, reached up and pulled on her and said, I'm white, right? Like, can you validate that I'm not going to be one of those people that is treated that way? And so and I'm white, right? Like, I'm good. And there's that fear. I think there's that fear, and when we don't have conversations with children and understand that this injustice affects all of us, and that if we think that because we're white that somehow we lose out from experiencing this injustice, we're wrong to think that.
But you see, people of color are dealing with not only like the economic and the psychological, but when white people look at it, they don't see the economic side, so they're like, but they don't actually see how it impacts them psychologically, right? And so since they don't see that and they don't recognize that, they don't like, oh, I don't want to be in that position, so I like being on top. I like being over others.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why our work has to be more connected to our humanity and more connected to who we are inside, what we value, and our own liberation inside and what that means. Because I'm only going to stay with this, being anti-racist if I understand what's in it for me, what's in it for my soul, what's in it for, my ability to connect to other human beings. If I just look at it as, oh, well, I'm just helping these people, or I just, I would like some justice, for those people, then, recently I had a woman say, oh, I've been doing this work for a long time, but I'm going to retire, so I'm not going to do it anymore. And I was like, okay, you were never doing it because you didn't understand.
It was a hobby. It seemed like it was a hobby.
Yes, because again, we're not tying it back to really that this is so much deeper, and where I think you were saying before about there's layers to this.
Yeah. Well, and that system too, the economic piece and everything. That white people are taught if we work hard. Then we'll achieve the American dream, and I mean everyone is told that.
Yeah, and if you don't have the American dream, then you're
not working hard, and so I just think that's another obstacle too. A lot of people work hard, but who has the access to achieve the dream, and who has limitations that span centuries
of racist policies.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's part of the learning, right? Because most people don't even know about the policies, or it just kind of like it just doesn't come into play, right? Because a lot of people don't even know or are not politically or civically minded anyway, right?
Well, and here you have the Vice President of the United States, well, not right now, but I meant Vice President Biden, who was talking about enslavement and relating that back to how Black people parent their children. And that somehow, again, you have someone in this position who served 8 years with the first Black president and still does not understand systemic racism and how the policies, racist policies that create access and opportunity for white people and deny, written in policy, denial and exclusion of Black and brown people and indigenous people. If you lock the door, I can't get in no matter how strong I am and no matter who I am. So if the door is locked and the door is always open, And always unlock, you don't even think about ever having a key.
All right. So let's switch up the topic to something that happened in I guess there's a documentary that's out. You want to give us some details about this documentary?
Yes. So over the weekend, I forget. I think I saw it on Facebook. But Chelsea Handler, who is a comedian, a white woman, and she put together this documentary, and it's on Netflix and available right now. I think it just came out on Friday. It's about an hour long. And so we're going to show you the trailer right now so you can sort of see what she's talking about, and definitely encourage you to watch the Netflix show and see what you think. And so we'll pause as you watch.
Thank you for having me here tonight. My name's Chelsea Handler, and I am as white as they come. I'm filming a documentary, as you may or may not know, about white privilege.
Oh.
I'm clearly the beneficiary of white privilege. I want to know how to be a better white person to people of color. We need to talk to people who are white and stop asking black people to solve our problems. Do you think it exists?
I wouldn't say it's totally non-existent, but it's not something that I see very commonly.
But would you see it if you're white? I got caught with dime bags on me with my boyfriend Tyshawn 3 times, and every time he was arrested and I was let go. It never occurred to me that it was a racial thing. I should have known better.
The obstacles are so harder for a black person than it is for a white person.
You guys know where you come from. You know your history. We don't know that. We still don't know if we were related to kings or queens, or if we were farmers, or if we built houses. We don't know. You guys know. That's the privilege you guys have.
White people have to have the conversation with white people. And so those are hard conversations.
It's like talking about porn at the dinner table. You know? Yeah. I mean, obviously at my dinner table that would be fine, but...
Lord have mercy.
You do need to learn about others, but you also have to learn about yourself.
Here I come, white people.
It's great to talk about it because you need to start somewhere.
Man.
But this rabbit hole goes deep, deeper than a documentary.
Okay, so that was an interesting clip from the show, and really poignant what the woman said at the end.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what you think after seeing that clip.
This is a rabbit hole.
Yeah. Sure. That I mean, yes, it is a rabbit hole, and I think you know, especially people with great intention, you know, we want checklists of like how to solve things, and then we can take care of it and know that it's all done, and that, you know, just doesn't happen. And so, you know, even, you know, we talked about how Chelsea Handler doing this documentary, you know, it's great to create awareness and share her journey, and people can learn from that too. But that comment, you can't solve this in a 1-hour documentary, and so the learning is endless. I mean, and you know, racism so many groups have been oppressed through racism, and so, you know, you're learning about African American and Black history, and then learning how, you know, before that, the indigenous people were on this land, and learning that history, both of which, when I was growing up, were so absent from curriculum. And then, you know, as people started immigrating, you know, learning about how people were treated when they got here. I mean, as a kid, I don't recall learning about, you know, anything about internment or, you know, any of those topics. And so the learning is really endless, and, you know, involves a lot of proactive behaviors on someone who wants to be educated, and then also trying to listen, you know, really at every opportunity, and to, you know, reflect on what that means
Do you think it's good that someone in her position, we see what happens when people of color in this position or in a high position or have status and speak about injustices, right? We saw what's happened with Colin Kaepernick. And then you have this white woman, Chelsea Handler,
Good point.
that can do an hour documentary. Still has, I mean, she wrote a book called Uganda Be Kidding Me.
Really?
Yes.
And was it about Uganda?
No.
Okay.
She just used that word. I mean, she reflects on that. She's like, what privilege do I have that I literally have the title? Like, she was ashamed that she literally used that country on her book title, really knowing nothing and not understanding the privilege of doing that and almost mocking it, making fun of a culture and a people. And so it's, I mean, I think, you know, the documentary goes through really highlighting the injustice of the justice system. And in terms of incarceration, you have, you know, her growing up as a teenager as a white woman, and she was dating, you know, a black boy or black man when they were in high school, and both doing drugs. But when they would get pulled over by the police, he would get arrested and she would get released. They would tell her, just go, just leave. And then they would arrest him. And she says poignantly, I never knew that had anything to do with my race.
That brings up two things. That brings up two things for me. One, what is she going to do about that? The fact that those things happen to him, like, and with the power that she has, how does she use her whiteness for good, right? And then also I'm wondering at the end, do they give resources at the end of this documentary? Do they really try to answer that question that last person in the audience brought up? Like, okay, it's an hour, so I don't think we want a series, but but you know, something, give people something to take with them.
Do you think it's a good thing that she's done this? I mean, in
I
her
think
stature?
As many people who can put these conversations on folks' radars and, you know, put it out there, I think that's positive. I do think people need, you know, the what next. Where do I go from here? You know, I went to this amazing conference this summer, and Ijeoma Oluo was there, and she talks about, you know, just being at this conference, that's a privilege. Like, you don't pat yourself on the back for showing up here to learn about anti-racism. Like, you know, that is a privilege in itself. And so, what are you going to do after you've left here? So, Chelsea Handler, you know, good job making that documentary. You know, what are you going to do now? And for folks watching it, now that you've watched it, what are you going to do now? You know, beyond just mentioning the documentary.
I think it's. I didn't see Tim Wise on the
I know
trailer.
he wasn't on their trailer, but he is. He is Tim Wise, who's an anti-racist educator, has written some books on whiteness and on his whiteness, coming from, you know, his perspective as being Jewish and white. That he was there to help her understand, you know, what white privilege could be. Although, I think she clearly understood once the movie or the documentary was over.
So the comedian, I'm wondering how she censors people of color in what she does moving forward, right? So I'll ask that of you. How do you center people of color with the work that you do?
That's a great question. So I try to listen a lot, and you know, again, living in and working in predominantly white communities, a lot of the work that I do is with white people. One of the, you know, gifts of working for Ideas is that each course is co-taught by a white person and a person of color, and that's really the most diverse work environment I've ever been a part of. And so having, you know, my colleagues there, really, social media is such a gift in that way. And so, you know, my feeds are just filled with, you know, activists of color who are willing to share, you know, the work that they're doing, sharing what they're learning. And then I can then share what I'm learning. And that's, I feel like that's really, seeking feedback, putting it out there. In my schools, it's predominantly white communities, but there are diverse populations, and more so in the student body than on the staff, although that's always an initiative. And so, again, seeking guidance from students of color, from colleagues of color. A lot of the work I do is in education.
I find that hard for students to be able to advocate for themselves and actually tell you, white woman, what you said was offensive, or white woman, that made me uncomfortable as a person of color. I mean, I find it hard for students to, especially when they're in middle school. I don't know if you're dealing with middle school. I mean, I've seen some courageous middle schoolers actually confront, some of those isms.
Absolutely. Our high school has a newly formed Black Student Union. And to your point, I don't know if there'd be a student in the room who would feel comfortable calling me on something, and I totally recognize the power dynamics and everything that are with that, but try to let the kids know that if they felt comfortable calling me on something or sharing feedback, that I would see it as a gift, that I would, amidst all the shame and feelings of fragility that would go with that, but that, the only way that we grow is to get feedback. And so, that's something I've been working on, especially with regards to conversations on race, is trying to let go of my ego and, grow from there.
So that would be a must if you were to tell other people out there wanting to do this work, they have to let go of their ego. Would that be one of them? Are there any others that you would tell them?
I think just be open to any new information, that, histories we've been taught are incomplete, media we've been presented with is incomplete, and some things are false. Sorry, incomplete and or lies. And so I've just had to shift my thinking to, I don't take everything that I learn, at face value, but just always learning, always researching more, because really the rabbit hole is endless. There's so much that we don't know or haven't been taught, or that's been clouded in, again, in the systems. And I keep saying that. I feel like maybe I've been too general, but when we look at representation in media, representation in literature, representation in our history, how people are portrayed, something I've been learning more about, impression of indigenous peoples, and even just looking at the mascot situation.
Have you seen the film Real Engine? REEL. Gotta see that.
Really?
Yes. But something came to mind when you were talking. Tim Wise, there was an incident some time back that I remember where someone wrote on either a blog of his or a tweet or something that, it's because you're white, you get to speak at these big events, and you're using it, and you don't acknowledge the fact that there are people of color who know as much as you do or even more than you do and are not getting those jobs. And he tweeted back or responded back, well, he was very mean, and it was unlike Tim Wise, and then later he apologized saying, well, that's my whiteness, where that came out.
Defensive.
Yes, he was defensive. He said something like, well, if you were as good as I, or if you were this or you were that, then maybe you would have gotten jobs or something like that. So something to that effect. So just wondering how you feel about, the fact that you're a white woman who gets to present, and then maybe you might be preventing someone of color from presenting. How do you grapple with that?
So, at least for me personally, if I knew I was taking someone else's slot, I would not be comfortable with that, and so would bow out. I do also think that white people have to talk to other white people, and that is important. So, I'm comfortable continuing to do that work. At the same time, if a person of color had an opportunity to, present in a slot that I was scheduled, I would have no problem stepping aside and, having my conversation with white folks elsewhere.
Have you gotten any pushback from white participants in any of your workshops or presentations?
Sure. I mean, I think if you take any, of these kind of introductory anti-racism courses, you learn about, racial identity development and the journey that we all have to go through. And, it's a lifelong journey. And so something that I've definitely gotten pushback. I recognize that I went through those same feelings too. Some people will be more vocal than others. And I've had to learn, that things take time. And so, managing my expectations that, having a conversation, maybe planting seeds, someone may not be ready to hear what I have to say at this exact moment. But maybe it'll sit for a little while. Maybe they'll read something else. Maybe they're a Chelsea Handler fan. And that's, I just hope that with each conversation, even people who are feeling or resistant or are not in that place, or in that space to really hear will, eventually.
I wanted to talk about the Wayland collaborative that you started, and I know that was one of the, obviously conversations that we've had talking about World of Wellesley and sort of how the organization has existed, in Wellesley as an opportunity to be able to engage around important conversations around human difference and justice and that type of thing. And I'm just curious how Wayland is going and how, just tell us a little bit about how that started and how that went and how it's going.
Can I get a clarifying point? So because she went to World of Wellesley, she started the one in Wayland, or is that?
A little bit.
Okay. How flattering.
And it's happened
Nice.
numerous times. So.
So when I'm teaching in Wellesley, and so I'm learning all about World of Wellesley, and then, living very close by in Wayland, we didn't have anything quite like that. As I started doing research, I did learn about little or big pockets of folks who were doing work like through the Wayland Diversity Network or through Race Amity or different organizations in town. And so at the time, I could not find, like an internet presence or anything that was similar to World of Wellesley. And so I got together with another woman in the community, and we just, put out information on, social media in like the Wayland patch, and just said, anyone interested in coming to talk about social justice in Wayland, feel free to come. And since then, we've done a lot of education for ourselves. So like book clubs, movie screenings. We did a community screening of 13th. When we were first forming, we invited Michelle to come talk about World of Wellesley and the work that the group does. Max Clow wrote a book on race, and he came and spoke about it. And so, again, a lot of book talks. We were not quite like a group yet. We are, we're more like a presence in town. So, there's 200 folks like in the group on Facebook or on our listserv. At any given event, we might have, 5 to, 50 people, depending on what it is. We did, we put on a workshop on bias and another one on talking to kids about identity.
So where did you get the most people for the talk?
So the most people was the workshop on talking to kids about identity. We were in touch with the Wayland schools, and so the principals were sending out information to families. That was the first workshop I had done, not with folks in education, so that was a big learning experience for me. And then the bias one we did later that year, had a good turnout too, but very different group of folks. And so, Yeah, and then we collaborated with Community Change Inc. for anti-racism organizing in the suburbs. We put on an event at Regis last fall. I'm listing things now, I'll stop.
But it's great because everyone can get to hear about them, and so they'll know where to go.
But what it led to was at Anti-Racism Organizing in the Suburbs, White People Challenging Racism put on a workshop. And so tonight actually is the first night of the Wayland White People Challenging Racism course. So I'm really excited that that's happening in town.
I wonder who's facilitating
I know,
that.
really
I
awesome.
wonder.
Let's see.
We're both facilitating that tonight.
Yes, in Wayland. And again, this was a white woman with your help, or did she reach out to you?
Yeah.
Okay, because Rachel, again, it was had this, took this class or knew about the workshop and wanted to put it together and got 16 people. And
Well, she attended your workshop at
At Eros.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So as a result of that.
Yeah.
So again,
It's great that this momentum is building and people are going to their prospective communities and starting this. Is amazing.
Yeah, it does. It's sometimes not as fast as we would
Right.
like. It is painfully slow. But if someone wanted or lives in Wayland that might be watching this, or even if someone in Wellesley who is watching wants to find the Wayland group, what is your Facebook?
Just Wayland Community for Social Justice. We also have a website, again, Wayland Community for Social Justice. that
So
has-
all spelled out, WellesleyCommunityForSocialJustice.com.org.
It's through Google, but if you Google the name of the group, it'll pop up.
And we'll post it on the screen too, so people will know what it is for sure. So tell me about raising white kids, because
Especially if you don't have
we
a lot of
don't.
people of color in your community.
Yeah, how are your girls taking this and talking to them?
Um,
If you want to share that.
No,
Do
I
you
can
wanna
share. I can totally share. That's another, parenting in general is another messy endeavor. And so I talk to the girls about identity whenever I can. And, if I'm seeing something that is related to some form of oppression, naming it, in small ways and in bigger ways.
Can you give us an example?
Yep, absolutely. So, bigger ways, might be, asking them, how was Columbus Day talked about in school, and then, giving some more factual history if it wasn't covered, or it may not have even come up at all. But making sure that they understand, that it's not a holiday, and who Columbus was, not, learning that myth that I was taught as a kid. Small conversation that I had the other day. We were reading a book. It's a character, my 5-year-old loves. I won't throw the author under the bus, although I'm going to write an email. But the girl loves to dress up, and in one of the images, she is dressed up like a Native American, and just amidst being dressed up like a witch and a doctor. And I just had a quick conversation with my 5-year-old and said, honey, it looks like she's dressing up like a culture there, and that cultures aren't costumes. And, we can dress up, like our heroes or like who we want to be, but if it's a part of someone's culture, how they may dress for celebrations or just in their day-to-day, then it's not really okay for us being a part of another culture to dress up like that as a costume. And the next night she was going through her pictures again. She's like, witch, doctor, we don't dress up like cultures, princess, and just kept moving forward. And obviously she just happened to remember from the night before. That'll take endless conversations. Picture books are the best. There's so many, and more recent too, but books about historical figures, books, telling history that isn't always taught, books on identity, books on, physical features like hair or skin or, and, when we're reading those books saying, we want to make sure that no matter, what your hairstyle looks like, that you aren't, judged or criticized for your hair. Because, in those messages of all hair is beautiful, which is the message we want to give our kids, planting those seeds that we would never want, one of our friends to get in trouble for having different hair or for dressing a certain way or from, so just kind of putting them on the lookout, or, if we're watching something and it's all white people, just naming, oh, wow, it's all white people in this movie. Or
I know, right? I want to know, how do you get support for doing this work? Because doing this work is really hard, it's exhausting, it's time consuming, but it needs to be done, right? It's good work. So how do you get support to continue on and to feel supported?
So, I mean, friends and colleagues who are also doing the work, you know, definitely called Michelle more than once, just be like, can we talk some things out? You know, feeling a little low today, or you know, and having those folks who you know that you can call, who might, you know, fill your cup a little bit. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's the humanity piece, you know, that, you know, if we want change to happen, kind of keeping at it. And also, like, some of the conferences or events or author talks I get to, like that, they're so inspirational. So that can lift me up too. I went to the Anti-Racist Book Festival put on by Ep.3 in Washington, D.C. last spring. It's the first one at American, at the Anti-Racist Research Center. And, you know, things like that. Just you know, hearing the work that others are doing and being
It's
so
inspiring.
inspired.
It gives you energy.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know, I recognize that that's such a privilege to be there, and it's a little selfish. Sorry, I hit the mic. But that does, you know, it energizes me and gives me resources too to keep going.
Right. It is. It is. It's complicated to leverage your privilege. You want to acknowledge your privilege, use your privilege to learn, use your privilege to teach, and then action. And what can we do to make our communities a better place, certainly your family a better family, in a sense, and giving your girls that amazing gift. And you know, they're not going to be raised like me and you were, to not know really the world that we lived in or that live in, and not understand why all the people that we went to school with was by design. So it is. It's complicated, but how do you encourage people to have the conversation? You know, we hope that people like Race and Point and that, you know, will benefit from this and this sort of open, authentic conversation. You know, that people will see, you know, yes, this is really difficult, but this is also really fulfilling. Yeah. It really is fulfilling. And so how do you know, have you had those conversations, or have you had to have those conversations in terms of encouraging people who you might see shutting down or walking away from you?
Especially people in your inner circle, like your family, your blood relatives.
You know, I've been really lucky. My family will always sit down for a talk with me. And so I recognize that is not the same in all families. But that, you know, they're interested in me and my life, even if it's not what they're doing at, you know, individuals are doing at that exact moment. So will listen to me share about, you know, something that's happening or that's been concerning me, or and keep, you know, and to keep coming back at it. I mean, for example, my dad is he's a big Chicago fan. He loves the Blackhawks, and so, you know, and they have a logo of, you know, Blackhawk, and you know, just coming back to that conversation, you know, over and over again, and you know, over time, you know, he reflected, you know, I'm still a Blackhawks fan, but I'm not going to wear my hat with that logo, you know, just didn't happen over one conversation, but, you know, coming back to conversations over and over again, or, you know.
Does Sharon have a mascot of an Indigenous person?
No, but we are part of the Hockomock League. That so that sports league was, and I think because I can't find the logo on any websites anymore, so that's good. But when I did start there a few years ago, you know, there was a, you know, Native American head, and each feather was the different towns that participate in the Hockomock League.
That just always was it's been mind-boggling for me that they have to use they feel that they have to use indigenous people to symbolize some sport like group. I just always felt that was odd. You can't. You think that they would use some European, symbol or something. Why they always felt that they had to use an indigenous person or an indigenous group to represent.
I think we should have Claudia Foxtree on the show to have that conversation. I think we should. As an Arawak woman, she speaks a lot about mascots, and I think that would be very helpful because I don't know that either.
Yeah. There's a great website. I can give you the link, but it lists all the towns that still currently have
in Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts, yes.
Yeah, let's definitely do that and put that on also for our viewers.
And I mean, Wayland went through its own journey too. You know,
And Wellesley
where the
too.
warriors and I guess it used to be a silhouette of an indigenous person or a head, and then it was just the spear with the feather, and so moving away from even that imagery. Because, again, why do Native Americans need to be tied to the athletics?
No human being, it doesn't, again, once you understand, and see Native people as human beings with a culture and with, thousands of cultures with, hundreds of languages or thousands of languages, and
They're to be respected.
Absolutely, as human beings, as people, as not a monolith, and there's 527 tribes recognized in this. I guess we could say.
Yeah, I would call
country.
them culture groups. That word tribes has so many connotations, negative connotations for me that they're attached to. Like people who are superior, calling them tribes, and it has such a negative cloud around it, the word tribe.
One more great resource, nativeland.ca is a new app or website, and you can just plug in any location in the U.S. and learn a little bit about whose land that you're on.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're on Massachusetts land.
Yes, this is the traditional territory of the Massachusetts people. You're absolutely right. And
and we should honor them. I don't know in Wellesley which group is the one in Wellesley, but
it's a Massachusetts.
So to say that, so whenever you even open up or do something.
The World of Wellesley does. We do
That's
land
great.
acknowledgments before every one of our events.
You want to explain that to everyone what that means? how important that is?
Yeah. Well, again, and this is all part of my journey and World of Wellesley, and here I have been president of an organization for several years whose mission is to make Wellesley a welcoming place for everyone. And as we started to reflect on that and to think about it as we're heading into our 30th anniversary, so what does that mean to make Wellesley a welcoming place? What does it mean to be welcoming? What is it, who gets to decide what's welcoming? And is it just if a lot of people feel welcomed, or is it all people feel welcomed? And so as you unpack that and start to think about what is welcoming and what really does that mean, we started to reflect on the foundation of understanding the land that we are on, and can we truly be a welcoming community if we do not honor and acknowledge the first people whose land we are on, and who were, again, went through a horrific genocide and removal from their ancestral land that they had been on since time in memoriam. And so we started to do, our research and to talk and to learn, and we reached out, and luckily I was able to connect with a woman who lives in town who is Ojibwe, and so I've been working with her and other Native people, and thinking about not only understanding that this was Massachusetts, land of the Massachusetts people, but what does that mean for Wellesley? What does that mean again for World of Wellesley? But a larger point as we look at the curriculum, and we know that children are now being told a more complete story about Columbus, the man that, that showed up not on the shores of the United States, but somewhere in the Dominican, and the Chicano people and Arawaks, and just the story of being able to make that story more complete. And so that is what we hope to bring. We're working with citizens in the community to bring to town meeting, hopefully, that Wellesley would honor Indigenous Peoples Day and remove Columbus Day from our calendars in the community. Obviously, it's a national holiday for Columbus, but I think that, for us in Wellesley, we want to tie it not only to the understanding of being welcoming and acknowledging the first people of this land, but to understand that injustice that happened when people are removed from their ancestral land, and and the trauma and the repeated trauma of seeing this man glorified who was responsible for the murder of their ancestors. And so, not only understanding that history of that person being honored for a holiday, but how is that reflected when we think about the land in Wellesley and the value that is given to land in Wellesley, and all of the meetings that are held every day about land and zoning and who gets access and who doesn't, and about affordable housing. Are we tying this back to the value of land, in looking at affordable housing? Do we understand that it's tied to the inequities of people who live in poverty in this community, and why they live in poverty, and why we had 300 children, people of color in high school walk out of the high school last year? I guess that, it's a bigger picture, it's a bigger story. And I think right now what's poignant is Indigenous people are fighting for this earth, fighting for us to stay on the earth, as climate now is becoming, again, such an urgency, as literally, as someone said, our house is on fire. And Indigenous people, are 5% of the population of the world, but are on 80% of the biodiversity of the land. And the capitalists are coming for that land. They want that land. You see what's happening in the Amazon with the fires, and now they want to, create something else and build in the Amazon, when that's responsible for the oxygen that we breathe.
Well, and there were people living there.
Yes, Indigenous people that have been living there for thousands of years. And those are the people who are fighting for our climate right now, who are fighting for us to remain on the planet.
When you go back to values, that's just so clear. When a person sees only themselves and not others, then they're like, okay, well, I want X, Y, and Z, so I don't care. They can burn the Amazon, because I want, these material things.
Right, I think all the money we can make.
And I want to have this power, and not thinking about, well, wait a minute, this is not about me. This is about everyone, the collective. But we don't come from a culture like that, right? Like Asian cultures more come from the collective, right? So,
I mean, that's the other reason to be always doing this work, is that, we're stronger together. And, we look at things like healthcare. I forget the name of his book, but, and so forget all that. But that when, people resist universal healthcare, because they don't want others to have it, that hurts them also. So you can't say, I'm going to prevent universal health care because I don't want that group to have it. That's going to hurt you as well. And whereas if we all bought in, then we'd have a stronger healthcare program. Or if we all bought into, these basic needs around housing, around education, it would be stronger for everyone. And so really, there's the selfishness piece. I mean, we would have an actual, stronger society
That's right.
if we all bought into thinking beyond our own immediate needs. So I'm in good schools, I don't need to worry about all the schools. But we'd actually be stronger as a country if every young person in this country
Was
going to grade school.
Absolutely.
So on that note, in closing, is there something that you would like to say to the audience?
Something I want to say later on. So I would like to say, if you hung in with us this whole time, good for you. And just back to that, like, point that we made earlier on, that there's so much learning and work to do. So, you know, pick one thing that you can do after watching this, or do tomorrow. You know, maybe Debbie Irving 21-day challenge or something like that. But you know, the work is long and hard and rewarding. So just, you know, pick one thing.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
And so for anyone else who's willing to come on with us and talk with us about issues of race at Race and Point, please give us a correspondence via email.
Yeah, at info@raceandpoint.com. And we're really thankful to Rebecca for coming and sharing. It's wonderful, and I enjoy these conversations so much, and I hope everyone else does too.
I hope so too. So thank you for watching.
Thank you.